Jefferson High School was the kind of place that wore its history like an old sweater, warm in places, itchy in others. Located in the sleepy suburb of Pine Brook, Ohio, it had football on Fridays, morning pledges, and the occasional town scandal. But the town was changing, and not everyone liked it. When Mr. Freeman arrived, most of the students didn't know what to expect. He was tall, black, soft-spoken but firm, and had a habit of calling students by their full names. He started every class with a question that didn't always have a right answer, just the kind that made you think. "So," he said on his first Monday, standing in front of a wall-sized map of the United States, "what's more powerful in shaping history, laws or stories?" Some students blinked, some looked down at their desks. But 2 rows from the front, Sam Caldwell raised his hand. "I think it's laws," Sam said, "because they decide what people can and can't do." Mr. Freeman smiled. "Interesting. Now, who disagrees?" That was how it always was. He never preached, never lectured for too long. Instead, he let them wrestle with ideas. He made history feel like something alive, not just black text on white pages. Within 2 weeks, half the students were talking about Reconstruction, civil disobedience, and Jim Crow over lunch in the cafeteria. But not everyone was happy. In Pine Brook, the PTA had always been a tight-knit circle, mostly white, mostly conservative. At the last school board meeting, Carol Mathers, a local businesswoman and mother of 3, brought up concerns about the new history teacher. She didn't name him directly, but everyone knew who she meant. "I'm just saying," she told the board with a practiced frown. "We've never had a problem before with teachers bringing politics into the classroom." The board members nodded politely. Some even agreed. But what bothered them more was how fast the complaint spread. The local Facebook group exploded with accusations, some real, many exaggerated. "He's teaching our kids to hate America." "My daughter says he made them talk about slavery for 3 days straight." "Another DEI hire shoved down our throats." Principal White tried to stay out of it, but pressure was building. A week later, Mr. Freeman got a memo asking for a meeting to discuss teaching methods. In room 203, the tension grew thicker. Mr. Freeman noticed the quiet change in his students. Some had stopped raising their hands. Others looked nervous when topics like civil rights came up. But there was one student who refused to shrink. Her name was Kelsey Tran. She sat near the back, half Vietnamese, short, loud when she wanted to be, and sharp enough to argue her way through anything. Kelsey was the kind of student teachers remembered. When she heard whispers in the hallway about Mr. Freeman being too radical, she bristled. "That's code," she said to Sam at lunch. "Code for what?" "For racist. You know what they mean." Sam didn't answer, but he didn't disagree either. That Friday, Mr. Freeman didn't show up to class. A substitute handed out a bland worksheet about the Bill of Rights and told them to read chapters they'd already covered. "Where's Mr. Freeman?" Kelsey asked. The sub shrugged. "He's on leave." The silence in room 203 was heavier than anything in the textbook. By Monday, the rumours were louder than facts. Some said he was fired. Others said he quit. No one really knew. But Kelsey wasn't about to let it go. She created an anonymous Instagram account, @justice4203. She posted, "Our teacher told us the truth. Now he's gone. Who's next? Us?" By that evening, the post had over 1,000 likes. Students started sharing it. Some parents took screenshots and sent them to the school. But something had changed. Something small but powerful. Kelsey and her classmates were done staying quiet. and they were just getting started. By Tuesday morning, the halls of Jefferson High hummed with a new kind of tension. Not the typical anxiety over tests or social drama, but something deeper. Kelsey, Tran, felt it in the way teachers looked at her when she walked past, in the whispers behind lockers that went silent as soon as she got close. Something had shifted. The Instagram accounts had gone viral in their small town standards. Not just students, but alumni and even a few teachers followed it now. Kelsey, behind her screen, watched the numbers tick up with a mixture of anxiety and resolve. She hadn't planned on becoming a face for anything, but now that she was, she refused to hide. Meanwhile, Mr. Freeman was silent. No statements, no social media presence. Nothing but the echo of his absence in room 203. Some students speculated he'd been told not to speak. Others feared he might never return. What they didn't know was that Mr. Freeman had received a firm warning from the district's HR. Remain on administrative leave and avoid public comment until further notice. Kelsey didn't care. She believed the truth mattered more than a policy memo, and she wasn't alone. By lunch, she'd gathered a group of friends. Sam Caldwell, who was hesitant but loyal, Jade Rodriguez, editor of the school newspaper, Isaiah Hill, quiet but fiercely intelligent, and Tyler Marks, a junior with a knack for graphic design. They called themselves 203 Rising, after the classroom number that now felt like a symbol. In the corner of the cafeteria, they plotted their next step. We need more than a post, Jade said, flipping through her notebook. We need a statement, something public. A petition, said Sam. Digital and on paper. Get signatures from students and alumni. I'll make posters, Tyler added. Bold, clean, with the hashtag. Put 'em everywhere. Kelsey leaned back, considering. And we make a speech at the school board meeting next week. That drew silence. You serious? Isaiah asked. Those meetings are a trap. They'll eat us alive. Then we bite back, Kelsey said, her jaw set. We speak, calm, respectful, but loud. The others looked at each other, unsure, but eventually they nodded. One by one, they agreed. That evening, the school's hallways transformed. Posters in bold red and black began appearing on every bulletin board. Justice for 203, bring back Mr. Freeman. Some were torn down within hours. Others were mysteriously removed by morning. But for every one lost, 2 more went up. The administration responded quickly. Principal White called an emergency staff meeting. I understand students are passionate, he told the faculty, but we need to stay neutral. Let's not escalate things. Our job is to provide stability. Some teachers agreed, others didn't. Ms. Daniels, who taught English, stood with her arms folded. Neutrality isn't an option when a teacher's career is on the line because of race. The room fell quiet. Principal White didn't respond. By Thursday, the petition had over 600 student signatures and nearly 200 alumni. Jade posted quotes from former students who had studied under Mr. Freeman at his last school. He made me believe my voice mattered. He taught history without sugarcoating it. That's rare. The best teacher I ever had, and the only one who made me see myself in the story. But backlash was growing just as fast. Carol Mathers, the PTA mum who had first raised concerns, went on local radio claiming that Mr. Freeman had an agenda. She didn't need to explain what kind. In Pinebrook, a dog whistle was louder than a siren. More parents joined the chorus. He's rewriting history. He's pushing victimhood. He's making our children feel ashamed to be white. When the local news station picked up the story, it featured a split screen. Angry parents at a town meeting and students holding posters with Mr. Freeman's name in bold ink. Kelsey watched the segment in her living room, her parents sitting beside her in stunned silence. "You okay?" her dad asked afterward. Kelsey shrugged. I'm just tired." Her mother reached over, brushing hair from her face. "You don't have to carry this on your own." "I'm not," Kelsey said. "We're all doing it." But that night, her phone buzzed with a message request from an unknown number. "You should stop. You don't know what you're messing with." She stared at the screen, heart pounding. Then she took a screenshot, blocked the number, and sent the image to the group chat with her friends. Isaiah messaged back. "You okay?" Kelsey replied. "Yeah, just more reason to keep going." On Friday morning, room 203 remained empty, the substitutes silent and stiff. But now, students came in wearing black t-shirts marked with Hack's Justice for 203 in white paint. Almost a third of the school. Teachers didn't say much. Some smiled faintly. Others looked away. But the biggest moment came at lunch. The group wheeled a cart into the courtyard with a speaker system, a table, and stacks of printed flyers. Jade took the mic first. "We're not here to fight," she said into the small amp. "We're here to ask why a teacher who made us think is being punished for doing his job." Then Kelsey stepped forward. "Mr. Freeman didn't teach us to hate anyone. He taught us to understand, to listen, to learn from the past so we don't repeat it. And if that's dangerous, then maybe the danger is in the silence." The crowd clapped. Some cheered. A few booed. But the noise wasn't what mattered. That night, someone threw red paint on the school's front sign. It dripped down the letters like blood. And the words they painted across the bricks were simple. "Keep school white." The red paint didn't wash off easily. Custodians arrived before sunrise, scrubbing at the vandalized sign with brushes and diluted bleach. But the stain lingered, faint rust-colored trails beneath the word Jefferson. Students walking past Monday morning didn't speak of it directly, but their silence carried weight. Principal White stood near the entrance, arms crossed, expression stony. "This is unacceptable," he told the morning announcements. "We will be investigating this hate crime fully." But Kelsey Tran wasn't convinced. Neither were the others in 203 Rising. "He said hate crime, but he didn't say racism," Isaiah muttered as they sat under the bleachers during their free period. "And still no word on Mr. Freeman," Jade added. "They care more about cleaning the walls than bringing him back." The group was tired, not just physically, but emotionally. Kelsey hadn't slept more than 4 hours in days. She spent nights answering DMs, moderating comments, and reporting threats. Even though their movement was growing, so was the resistance. New groups had formed, anonymous Instagram accounts with names like @RealJeffersonVoices and @ProtectOurKids. They posted screenshots of out-of-context lessons and fear-mongering captions like, "This is what they want your kids to learn." Tyler found one comment that chilled them all. "He should be grateful we haven't done worse than paint." The administration remained silent on these threats. Teachers were warned to avoid discussing the Freeman situation. But in the hallways, lines were being drawn. Students who wore black for justice were getting harassed. Some were pushed in the lunch line. Others had slurs muttered at them under breath. One afternoon, someone slipped a note into Kelsey's locker. "You'll regret this." No name, no handwriting to trace. Just those 4 words written in blue ink. But for every attempt to silence them, the students grew louder. Jade had scheduled an interview with the Pinebrook Gazette. Sam had spoken with a local podcast. And Kelsey had drafted a speech, one she would deliver at the school board meeting in 3 days. Still, doubt crept in. That night, she sat at her desk, staring at the first line of her speech. Her laptop hummed softly. Outside, wind rustled the trees. Her parents were in the next room, whispering, worried, but trying not to show it. She closed her eyes and tried to remember Mr. Freeman's voice. History doesn't move by itself. People push it. She opened her eyes and started typing again. Elsewhere in Pinebrook, another meeting was taking place. Quieter, but no less powerful. Carol Mathers stood in the basement of her church, facing a dozen PTA members. Folded chairs formed a loose circle around a table covered in coffee urns and dry cookies. "This is bigger than just one teacher," she said, her voice low but firm. "This is about what kind of values we're teaching, about keeping our kids grounded, traditional." One parent nodded, another murmured agreement. "The board meeting's coming up," Carol continued. "We need to make sure our voices are heard, loudly." "But some of these kids," one father said, frowning, "they're already organizing. Marches, speeches. They've got the media on their side." Carol smiled thinly. "Then we remind the board who pays the taxes, who funds this school, who votes." They all knew what she meant. At school the next morning, 203, rising huddled before class. Jade handed out printed flyers listing bullet points, over 700 student signatures, over 300 alumni, 5 current teachers willing to speak anonymously, one band teacher still silenced. "We need to control the narrative," Jade said. "If we don't, they will." That day, Tyler released a video, a montage of quotes from students, slow motion footage of their protest, clips from Mr. Freeman's earlier lessons, stitched together with music that hit every emotional note. They uploaded it to YouTube and Instagram. It spread like wildfire. Kelsey's phone buzzed all day with messages of support and hate. At 3:02 p.m., as she walked to her locker, she found it again. Red paint. This time smeared across the door, letters dripping like blood. "Traitor." Her chest tightened. She didn't cry. Not then. She took a photo, wiped the door with her sleeve and walked away. But inside, something cracked. The board meeting arrived 2 days later. The gymnasium was packed. Folding chairs filled with parents, students, teachers, and news crews. A long table at the front seated the board members, who looked uneasy as the noise settled. First came public comments. A man in a camouflage cap spoke first, voice shaking. "I don't want my kid being told they're the problem just because of their skin color." A woman followed, clutching a Bible. "We need to return to godly teaching, not this critical race nonsense." Then a teacher stepped up, Ms. Daniels. "Mr. Freeman did what we all should do," she said. "He challenged students to think. He made them ask hard questions. And he did it without hatred, without bias. I've been here 15 years. I've never seen a teacher connect with kids like that." Then Kelsey was called. She stood, papers shaking in her hand, and walked slowly to the podium. I'm not here because I like attention, she began. I'm here because a teacher told us that history includes all of us, and he got punished for it. She read each line with care, about freedom, truth, and the right to learn without fear, about the threats, the paint, the silence from the very people meant to protect them. When she finished, the room was quiet. Then came the board's statement. Mr. Freeman, they said, would remain on administrative leave until a thorough review was completed. No timeline, no specifics, just more waiting. The crowd erupted, some cheering, others booing. Carol Mathers smiled smugly. But as Kelsey walked back to her seat, a hand touched her shoulder. It was Mr. Freeman. He stood in the back, silent, wearing a grey coat and a tired smile. He gave her a small nod, just enough to say, "You did good." She blinked back tears and nodded back. That night, the Instagram page posted a new image. A simple photo of the school under soft morning light. Caption, "History is still watching." But the war wasn't over, and someone wasn't finished fighting dirty. The day after the school board meeting, Jefferson High was quieter than usual. Not because the tension had lifted, but because the mask had slipped. Everyone had seen what lay beneath. The ugliness of fear, the cruelty of power, and the unwillingness of authority to protect its own. And yet, despite the board's refusal to reinstate Mr. Freeman, the moment had marked a shift. The students had stood tall, and their voices had echoed further than any of them expected. Local news stations picked up the story, framing it as a clash between divided community values and student activism. The Pinebrook Gazette ran a front-page photo of Kelsey standing at the podium under the headline, "Student Voice Challenges." Silence. The photo went viral. By noon that day, national education advocacy groups had begun reposting the story. One tweet read, "When students rise, truth rises with them. #Justice for 203. Kelsey didn't see the tweet until hours later. She was in the nurse's office with a splitting headache and shallow breath. The stress was catching up. For a moment, she'd wanted to quit, to hand it off to someone else. But when she checked her phone, her inbox was full. Hundreds of messages from students across the country. "We had a teacher like that too. Thank you for speaking up. You're not alone. Wish someone had done what you did at our school." Still, not all the messages were kind. One email read, "You should burn in hell with your teacher. Keep pushing. See what happens." Another, sent from an anonymous domain, included a photo of her walking home the night before. A photo clearly taken from behind a bush. Her hands shook. She forwarded the email to Jade and Isaiah, then showed it to her father. He called the police that evening. The report was filed, but they offered no real protection. "Keep an eye out. Let us know if it escalates," the officer said, then returned to his cruiser. That night, Kelsey moved her desk away from the window and couldn't sleep. Across town, Principal White sat alone in his office, the blinds half drawn. He stared at a folder labelled "Freeman, Internal Review." It was thin, just a few observations, parent complaints, and a printed transcript from a class recording someone had secretly submitted. He closed it, then looked at an email from the superintendent. "District recommends discretion. Do not provoke further media attention." It wasn't about right or wrong anymore. It was about optics. White leaned back in his chair. Somewhere deep inside, he hated this. He'd once been a teacher too. He knew what real passion looked like in a classroom. He'd seen it in Freeman, but now his hands felt tied by invisible strings, strings pulled by money, politics, and fear. Still, part of him wanted to fight. He just didn't know how. The next day, 203. Rising met behind the auditorium. We need to escalate, Jade said, pacing. Posters and speeches aren't enough. They're ignoring us again. Tyler suggested a walkout. A real one, not just some lunchtime thing, full class strike. Get the whole district's attention. Kelsey hesitated. That could get people suspended. Isaiah shrugged. So, what's left to lose? The silence that followed wasn't doubt. It was resolve. Monday morning, first period. Just as the bell rang, the students in room 203 stood silently. Then, one by one, they walked out, down the hall, through the doors, and onto the front lawn. Word spread like wildfire. Within 15 minutes, over 400 students had left their classrooms. They stood shoulder to shoulder in the November cold, holding signs, wrapped in scarves and courage. One banner stretched across the lawn. Truth is not a threat. Inside, chaos erupted. Teachers didn't know whether to stop them. Some joined in, others stood back, unsure. Principal White watched from his office window, hands clenched. But then something unexpected happened. At 10:17 a.m., a fire alarm rang. Loud, piercing. Students looked around, confused. It wasn't part of the protest. Within minutes, smoke began curling from the east wing of the building. Real smoke. Someone had lit a small fire in the boys' locker room. It was contained quickly, but the damage was done. Emergency services arrived. Students were evacuated. Firefighters combed the building. And then came the message, handwritten in black marker across the locker room door. One spark is all it takes. The message spread faster than the flames. Rumors ignited. That was us, a girl whispered to her friend. 203. Rising set the fire. Kelsey heard it in the hallway. She spun around. No, we didn't. But facts didn't matter anymore. By afternoon, the district sent out an emergency bulletin. All student protests suspended. Investigation pending. The walkout was labelled a disruption. 203 Rising was unofficially blamed for the chaos. And by 6 o'clock p.m., Kelsey's face was on the local evening news, again. Only this time, the tone had changed. Is this student protest movement going too far? Carol Mathers appeared on the screen, arms folded. We warned them. This is what happens when schools become political battlegrounds. The fire was inevitable. Now it's about safety. She didn't mention that her son had been caught sharing the locker code with 3 seniors the week before. That his Instagram had posted "just wait" the night before the fire. None of that was investigated. But 203 Rising was. By Tuesday, Kelsey was suspended. Official reason: disruption of school operations. So was Isaiah. And Jade. Tyler got a call home. Sam was told to distance himself if he wanted to remain on the honor roll. The movement was being dismantled, or so they thought. Late that night, Kelsey sat on the curb outside her house. Her hands were cold. Her head ached. She didn't notice the car pull up until the window rolled down. A voice called out, "Ms. Tran?" She turned. A woman with a press badge leaned out the window. "My name's Grace Ellis, New York Times. Mind if I ask you a few questions?" Kelsey stared at her, too stunned to speak. The story wasn't dying. It was just beginning. The street lamp buzzed softly above Kelsey as she stood outside, arms crossed against the chill, facing Grace Ellis, the journalist whose name she recognized instantly. "You're really from the Times?" she asked, her voice cracking slightly from exhaustion. Grace nodded, holding up her press badge. Been following your story for days. I drove in this morning. The Freeman story isn't just a local fight anymore. It's a national one. Kelsey wasn't sure whether to feel flattered, overwhelmed, or scared. I'm suspended, she said flatly. They're trying to pin the fire on us. That's exactly why it matters, Grace replied. Students organizing against injustice, being silenced and criminalized for speaking up. It's not just Pine Brook. It's everywhere. Kelsey rubbed her eyes. I'm just a kid. I didn't ask for all this. No one ever does, Grace said gently. But you've got the mic now. Want to use it? The next day, while most of Jefferson High returned to classes under a strained and fearful silence, Grace Ellis sat across from Kelsey in her kitchen, a voice recorder on the table between them. Kelsey's parents sat quietly nearby, unsure but supportive. She spoke cautiously at first, but as the questions turned personal, why she started the Instagram page, how she felt when Mr. Freeman disappeared, what it meant to be called a troublemaker, her voice grew steadier. They said he made us ashamed, she told Grace, but the truth is, he made us proud to be curious, proud to ask questions, and they hated that. The article went live 2 days later. The students who refused to forget. It was a long, detailed piece. Names were changed for safety, but Kelsey's quotes were raw, unfiltered. Photos showed student-made posters, screenshots from @Justice4203, and one powerful image of Mr. Freeman mid-lecture, gesturing toward a chalkboard that read, "History is a mirror, not a shield." The impact was immediate. National organizations picked it up. Civil rights lawyers reached out. Teachers' unions sent letters of support. One black professor from Yale tweeted, "A young girl with a voice, a school with its back turned, and a teacher who dared to tell the truth. America, are you listening?" But with attention came consequences. A new flyer appeared around school, black and white, anonymous. It showed Mr. Freeman's photo with a red X through it and the words, "Our town, our values." That day, the Tran family received a threatening phone call. The caller used slurs. Her parents considered pulling Kelsey from school permanently, but Kelsey refused. Meanwhile, Isaiah Hill sat in his bedroom with his laptop open, rereading the district's vague statement about the fire investigation. It didn't name names. It didn't offer proof. But the silence from the administration allowed rumors to flourish. He opened a new document and began to write. "They called us vandals. They called us liars. But we never lit that fire. We lit a conversation." He posted it to @Justice4203 that evening. The caption read, "We're not done." The post went viral again. Even suspended, even scattered, 203 Rising hadn't died. It had evolved. Principal White sat in his office late that night, staring at 2 emails on his screen. One was from the superintendent. "Do not engage with national media. You are not authorized to speak on this matter." The other was from a parent he barely knew. "My son said Mr. Freeman saved his life. Before him, he thought he was dumb. He hated school. Now he reads about Malcolm X and wants to be a lawyer. Do the right thing." White felt the weight of the walls around him. He had once imagined himself a reformer, a listener. But somewhere along the way, he had become another cog in the machine. He opened Mr. Freeman's personnel file again. There were no formal infractions, just concerns, all vague, all unsubstantiated. He stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the quiet field where the students had gathered. For the first time in weeks, he didn't feel like a leader. He felt like a coward, and he hated it. Across town, in a modest apartment above a quiet bookstore, Mr. Freeman sat reading a letter. It was handwritten. Dear Mr. Freeman, I used to think history was just about wars and dead people. You made it about me. You made me want to know where I come from. I'm sorry they did this to you. We miss you. Emily, period, 2. There were dozens more like it in a shoebox beside him. Students of all colours, grades, backgrounds, telling him not to give up. Still, the pain was real. He had never imagined that teaching truth would lead to this. He'd spent his life walking a careful line, professional, composed, apolitical. He never shouted, never pushed. But even his presence, his skin, his honesty, they had been enough to trigger a town into panic. And yet, the students had stood for him. He picked up a pen and began to write. Back at Jefferson High, a fire drill was announced the following Friday. Students groaned, assuming it was more performative caution. But when they filed outside, they saw something waiting for them on the field. A large banner, white letters on blue cloth. We are 203. It was tied between 2 soccer goals. No one knew who'd put it up. A few teachers smiled. Others walked away. But slowly, without speaking, students began taking out their phones, snapping photos, uploading them. Kelsey saw the image from home. She hadn't stepped foot on campus in a week. But when she saw the message, her chest tightened. Not from fear this time, but hope. Maybe they hadn't won, but they weren't losing either. And then, quietly, Mr. Freeman logged into Instagram for the first time since his suspension. He opened @Justice4203. He clicked message and typed, "Thank you, I'm not going anywhere." By the second week of the student suspensions, Jefferson High felt like a building suspended in time. The halls had grown quieter, but not in the comforting way teachers hoped for. It was the hush of a school holding its breath, waiting for something to snap. And it would. The banner, "We are 203, had lasted only 12 minutes before it was cut down. But 12 minutes were enough. Students had posted photos, tagged news outlets, and turned it into a digital symbol. It became a trending topic under hashtags like #BringBackFreeman and #StudentVoicesMatter. What was once a local controversy had now breached the walls of national education discourse. Yet, despite the growing support online, real change inside the school lagged behind. Kelsey Tran, still suspended, sat at her kitchen table beside stacks of unfinished homework. Not because she couldn't do it, but because she didn't see the point. Her teachers were emailing assignments, pretending this was temporary, pretending everything was normal. But how do you write a 5-paragraph essay on the Constitution when your voice is being erased? Her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Check your email. She opened her inbox. There it was. A PDF file titled Confidential Internal Memo, District Review. She hesitated, then opened it. The document was dense, legal phrases, administrative codes, policy jargon. But buried in the middle was a paragraph that made her breath catch. Mr. Freeman's suspension was enacted without due process following unofficial parental pressure and social media activity. No violations of curriculum policy were identified in the preliminary review. She stared at the screen. They had suspended him without cause. The district knew. Someone had leaked the truth. Meanwhile, Principal White sat at his desk with the coffee going cold. He read the same document Kelsey now held. only his was stamped officially, and his heart was pounding. He had asked for this review after a sleepless night spent rereading Mr. Freeman's lessons, student essays, and old classroom footage. He had gone into education to make a difference, to help students feel seen. But lately, all he felt was compromise. He picked up the phone. "Get me the superintendent," he said. "Now." While Kelsey processed the document, 203 Rising had quietly regrouped, this time remotely. Jade organised a Zoom call with suspended members and a few trusted allies. Isaiah, now staying with his cousin due to increased threats at home, logged in from a dimly lit room. "I found something," Kelsey said, sharing her screen. "Someone leaked the internal memo. It proves the district had no grounds to suspend Mr. Freeman, or us." The group fell silent. "This is it," Jade whispered. "This is our chance." "What if they come after us harder?" Tyler asked. "They'll call it stolen, illegal, whatever." "Let them," Isaiah said. "We didn't hack it. Someone gave it to her. They know what's happening is wrong." Kelsey nodded slowly. "We need to go public." They drafted a new post, a statement not just of anger, but of truth. It included carefully quoted sections from the leaked memo, followed by a message. "You tried to break us, but truth leaves a trail, and we just found it." They posted it to @Justice4203. 10 minutes later, the school district's main phone lines crashed from the volume of calls. Inside his office, Principal White was staring at his own inbox, which now had 327 new messages, all with some variation of "Reinstate Freeman. Reinstate the students." He rose slowly and walked to the window. Students were beginning to gather again on the lawn. This time, not just those in black t-shirts, but band members, theatre kids, football players, freshmen who'd never even had Mr. Freeman. They stood holding a giant paper scroll. On it were names, thousands of them, gathered in under a week. A petition with signatures from across the country. In front of the crowd stood Kelsey. She wasn't on school property, just across the street, holding a printed copy of the memo. She held it up. No microphone, no speech, just truth. White turned from the window and made a decision. By 5 o'clock p.m., a new email was sent from the principal's office to all Jefferson High families. Effective immediately, the district is lifting the suspensions of all students connected to the recent protests. A formal review of Mr. Freeman's case is ongoing, but he will be allowed to return to Jefferson High as a guest speaker pending further decisions. It wasn't full justice. Not yet. But it was movement. Mr. Freeman returned that Friday. He didn't enter through the main entrance. Instead, he walked through the back gate and down the track field, past stunned students who slowly began clapping. When he entered the auditorium, quiet, reserved, holding his old leather bag, dozens of students rose to their feet. Not out of performance, but out of gratitude. He approached the podium, paused, then said simply, "Let's talk about truth." His talk wasn't angry. It was measured. He told the story of history, not just the one in textbooks, but the one they were living. He praised the students, not just for organizing, but for learning, growing, questioning. He ended with a question. The question I started with: what's more powerful, laws or stories? The students answered, "Stories." He smiled. "And now, you're writing one." That night, after the speech, Kelsey sat on the bleachers, legs crossed beneath her. The air smelled like winter. Mr. Freeman walked up beside her. "You shouldn't have had to do what you did," he said quietly. She looked down. "But we did it, because you showed us how." He nodded, then reached into his coat and handed her a small box. She opened it. Inside was a keychain, shaped like a chalkboard, with a single word engraved, "Truth." But not everyone was celebrating. That same night, a car idled outside Kelsey's home for 20 minutes before driving off. A new comment appeared on their page. "Watch your back, little activist." And at the next school board meeting, whispers spread of budget cuts, policy changes, and a coming wave of administrative reshuffling. The battle wasn't over. But, for the first time, it felt winnable. The Monday after Mr. Freeman's return as a guest speaker, the atmosphere at Jefferson High was a strange mix of triumph and dread. Though officially not reinstated, his presence on campus sent a clear message. The students had forced the administration's hand. But for every student that smiled at the sight of him, another cast narrowed eyes or avoided eye contact altogether. Some teachers had even begun refusing to participate in school-wide assemblies, citing personal discomfort with Mr. Freeman's influence. The undercurrent of resentment was no longer subtle. It was organized. In the staff parking lot, someone had placed a homemade sign taped to a post. "Keep politics out of our schools. Enough is enough." It wasn't signed, but the message was clear. The old guard wasn't giving up, and now they were angry. Inside, Principal White was walking a political tightrope. He knew reinstating Mr. Freeman completely would draw fire from the school board and half the town. But leaving things as they were, offering him as a guest instead of a teacher, only prolonged the pain and confusion. He had scheduled a closed-door meeting with district officials to discuss pathways to resolution, but nothing about this felt administrative anymore. It felt personal, and it was far from resolved. Meanwhile, Kelsey Tran had returned to campus. She stepped into Jefferson High's hallways like a veteran coming home from war. Some students clapped, others murmured, a few sneered, but she walked straight back, her expression calm. 203. Rising had changed. It was no longer a tight group of 5. It was a movement. Dozens of students now claimed the name proudly. They wore small lapel pins shaped like chalkboards. They passed around flyers about inclusive education, anti-racism workshops, and student voice coalitions. But they also watched their backs. Anonymous threats had become more pointed. One student, a freshman named Marcus, had been shoved in the stairwell for wearing a 203 pin. Someone slashed the tires of Jade's bike. The school installed new security cameras, but none of them faced the parking lot. That week, the Instagram page at @RealJeffersonVoices posted, "Freeman returns and our school burns again. Coincidence or engineered chaos? I'll wake up Pinebrook." Below were comments from adult accounts, parents mostly, urging the school to purge the radicals and clean house. Kelsey read the post and sighed. "They're scared," Isaiah said beside her. "That means we're still winning." She wasn't sure it felt like winning. Then something unexpected happened. One of the school's chemistry teachers, Mr. Bernard, quiet, always in his lab coat, rarely political, stood up during a faculty meeting and said, "I've been here for 19 years. I've watched this school slip backward because we're afraid of confronting the truth. Mr. Freeman didn't divide this school. He revealed where it was already cracked." No one interrupted him. When he finished, he walked out, leaving a stunned silence behind. The next day, a student found a folded note in her locker. No name, just a quote. If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. Desmond Tutu. These small ripples built momentum. A group of alumni from Freeman's previous school organised a video compilation of testimonials. Former students recorded messages about how he changed their lives, their paths, their sense of identity. The video was posted to YouTube with the title, "He Taught Us to See Ourselves." The video hit 500,000 views in 3 days. But again, with visibility came pushback. This time it came with suits and legal threats. Carol Mathers, ever present behind the scenes, had rallied a group of parents to file a formal grievance. The document accused Mr. Freeman and 203 Rising of creating a hostile educational environment for white students. The language was polished, deliberate. It referenced obscure district policies and claimed Mr. Freeman had violated his professional neutrality. Principal White was forced to place Freeman under another investigative hold. Again, Mr. Freeman didn't speak when they handed him the notice. He simply folded the paper, thanked the messenger, and walked out the front door. Again. But this time, there was someone waiting. Grace Ellis. The reporter from the New York Times had returned, this time with a camera crew and a full documentary team. Her first article had sparked something. Now she wanted to tell the whole story. "I want to go deeper," she told Kelsey, Jade, and Isaiah later that afternoon. "Not just the fight, but the heart of it. What it means to live this every day." The students agreed. They were exhausted, but they weren't done. That night, Kelsey sat at her desk, staring at her screen. She opened a new post. They removed him again. But here's the truth. He's never really been gone, because he lives in us. In every classroom where questions still matter. In every hallway where students dare to care. You can silence a man. You can't silence a movement. She pressed post, and then she cried. Not because they'd lost, but because they were still fighting, and it was so heavy. The next morning, the Tran family woke to find a rock through their front window. Attached to it, a piece of notebook paper with the words, "You lost, get out." Police came, took a report. Again. Kelsey's parents sat her down. "We want you to stay home this week," her father said. "Just a few days. Let this cool down." She stared at her chipped coffee mug. Her breath came slow and quiet. "I'll stay home," she said softly. "But I won't stay silent." At school, Jade and Isaiah took the reins. They organized a silent protest. At 10 o'clock a.m., students across Jefferson High stood up, placed tape over their mouths, and sat in the hallways. No chanting, no speeches, just silence. A silence that screamed. Photos were taken, posted, shared. Silent. For Freeman trended across multiple platforms. Carol Mathers called it a tantrum. But the district was sweating. Donors were calling. Colleges were asking questions. And then, as if orchestrated by fate, an unexpected voice joined the conversation. Congresswoman Marla Everett, a former teacher, now rising political star, tweeted, "I stand with the students of Jefferson High. I stand with Mr. Freeman, and I stand for truth in education." That single post tipped the scale. By Friday evening, the superintendent's office announced a full reversal of Mr. Freeman's suspension and a formal reinstatement with full duties and back pay. The email was short. The impact was not. The following Monday, Mr. Freeman walked back into room 203. No cameras, no fanfare, just him. He stood in front of the board and wrote one word. Perspective. Then turned to the class and smiled. What changed while I was gone? Kelsey raised her hand from the second row. Everything, she said. And also nothing. He nodded. Let's begin. Room 203 had never felt so alive. Mr. Freeman's first full day back brought a sense of cautious optimism to Jefferson High. His presence alone had the power to shift the atmosphere. When he greeted the class with his familiar, "All right, thinkers, let's dig deeper." Many students smiled for the first time in weeks. But beneath the surface, tensions simmered. The day he returned, 2 parents withdrew their children from Jefferson High. By the end of the week, 5 more followed. Rumors circulated that a private Christian academy on the edge of town had quietly offered scholarships to concerned families. Local media covered the withdrawals with carefully worded neutrality, using phrases like community division and parental rights. But everyone knew what it meant. Freeman's reinstatement wasn't just a symbolic victory, it was a trigger. To his students, Mr. Freeman represented empowerment, but to others in Pine Brook, he had become the embodiment of everything they feared: change, accountability, truth. That Friday, someone spray painted the school's outer wall with the words, "One of us doesn't belong." It wasn't signed. It didn't need to be. Security cameras had conveniently been under maintenance. Principal White walked the hallways with heavy steps. He'd spent years cultivating neutrality, trying to keep his school out of controversy, trying to make peace through silence. But silence, he'd learned, had a cost. And now, even his attempts to do the right thing came under fire. His inbox overflowed daily with complaints from parents, accusations that he had let the radicals take over, that he was playing favourites, that he had betrayed the real Pine Brook. But mixed among the vitriol were emails from students, alumni, even fellow principals across the state, thanking him, urging him not to back down. He kept a copy of one message on his desk. "You showed us that leadership isn't about popularity, it's about integrity." Still, the pressure mounted. At the next PTA meeting, Carol Mathers stood in front of a full house and declared, "We may have lost this battle, but the war for our schools is not over. I promise you, this isn't the end." Behind her, a new group had formed. Pine Brook Parents for Tradition. Their mission was clear: restore balance in the classroom, demand curricular oversight, and ensure community values were upheld. They began reviewing every book Mr. Freeman assigned. They requested transcripts of his lectures. They demanded that the school board create a civic review committee with parent representation. Specifically, parents they appointed. The board, wary of more national attention, delayed action. But the pressure was undeniable. Jefferson High had become a symbol, and symbols, by nature, attract fire. Inside the school, the mood was shifting too. While 203 Rising still existed, it was no longer a tight-knit crew. It had become an ecosystem. Some members stayed fully involved, attending every meeting, sharing every post. Others drifted, exhausted from weeks of battle, quietly stepping away, and a few turned. One such student was Luke Parker. He had been part of the movement at first, attending protests, signing petitions. But after his parents threatened to pull his college fund, he'd started questioning his position, and eventually he crossed over. Luke began showing up to Tradition Club meetings, an unofficial group of students aligned with Carol Mathers and her circle. They called themselves the Real Patriots. They wore pins of the American flag crossed with the school crest. They spoke in measured tones about fairness and bias in education. But Kelsey knew better. These people aren't looking for balance, she told Jade after spotting the club's flyers on the cafeteria wall. They want to erase us. Jade nodded grimly. They're trying to weaponize respectability. Like, oh, we're not racist. We just want both sides taught. Even if one side is literally whitewashing genocide. Isaiah added, and now they're organizing. He showed them a post from a private group called Pinebrook Youth Forum. Screenshots leaked from the group included phrases like, let's take our school back. Expose the 203 cult. They're the real bullies. Then came a video, clearly edited, of Mr. Freeman talking about redlining and structural racism. The clip was spliced to make it sound like he'd called all white students complicit in oppression. The video was uploaded anonymously and quickly shared by @RealJeffersonVoices with the caption, "This is what they defend. Indoctrination in our schools." Mr. Freeman was summoned to the district office within 24 hours. Again. That weekend, Kelsey was invited to speak at a youth summit in Columbus, organized by the state's Student Justice Network. The invitation was an honor, but also a risk. Her parents hesitated. After the rock, after the calls, after the online threats. But she told them, I can't disappear. That's what they want. So she went, and she spoke, not just about Mr. Freeman or 203 rising, but about the price of being heard, the violence of silence, and the courage it took for teenagers to do what adults wouldn't. Her speech ended with a quiet line. We didn't choose this fight, but we refused to walk away from it. The crowd gave a standing ovation. Later that night, her speech was uploaded to YouTube and hit 100,000 views in 2 days. The next morning, someone posted her home address in the comments. Meanwhile, Grace Ellis, now deep into production on her documentary, began collecting testimonies from faculty. Many declined, but a few stepped forward. One custodian shared how she'd found torn-up lesson plans in the trash, pages marked "too political" in red pen. A retired teacher admitted she'd been warned by the district not to include contemporary black authors in her curriculum, because it might trigger some parents. The documentary's working title became Truth Interrupted. Grace planned to release it during the upcoming National Education Conference in Chicago. Its impact, she hoped, would go far beyond Pinebrook. Back at Jefferson High, another surprise surfaced. A junior named Natalie Chen, quiet, brilliant, unnoticed, launched a web app called Track the Truth. It catalogued every incident since Mr. Freeman's suspension. Articles, petitions, threats, vandalism, withdrawals, donations, board votes. It was a timeline, a living archive, and it couldn't be erased, even if the school tried. But the most shocking moment came at the next school board meeting. As protesters gathered outside, students sat inside waiting to speak. Midway through the meeting, Principal White stood and asked for the floor. The room hushed. I've been silent too long, he said. Not because I didn't care, but because I was afraid. Afraid of backlash, of losing control, of making the wrong move. He looked down at his notes. But I realized this. Silence doesn't protect students. It protects systems. And I didn't come into education to protect systems. I came to serve students. Then he looked at the board. I fully endorse the reinstatement of Mr. Freeman. Not as a guest, but as a teacher. Permanently, without conditions. And I urge this board to do the same. The room erupted. Shouts, applause, jeers. Carol Mathers stormed out, but the words hung in the air. Something had changed, and this time it wasn't just the students carrying the fire. When Principal White finished his speech at the school board meeting, silence hung like fog over the auditorium. For a long moment, no one spoke. Not the board, not the audience, not even the press packed into the back rows. Then came the ripple. It began as hesitant clapping from a few students seated near the front. Then more joined in. Alumni, teachers, parents. Some stood. Others remained seated in tight-lipped disapproval. The board adjourned without comment. But the air in Pinebrook had shifted again. For Mr. Freeman, the moment was quietly seismic. He hadn't asked for White's endorsement. He hadn't expected it. And though it was not a vote, not a contract, it was the clearest signal yet that the tide had turned. Still, he knew better than to believe the war was over. The next morning, his mailbox overflowed with both praise and hatred. One letter, scrawled in shaky handwriting, read, "You're poisoning these kids. Get out before someone makes you." It wasn't the first threat, but something about this one felt more deliberate. The return address was fake, but the postmark was from within Pinebrook. Meanwhile, in room 203, the students gathered like old soldiers reconvening after a ceasefire. Some still wore their 203 pins. Others sat quietly, wary of what came next. "Think of today as a reset," Mr. Freeman said as he paced the front of the room. "We know more than we did before. We've seen more, felt more. That changes how we learn. Let's start from there." He opened with a reading from James Baldwin. Then he invited discussion. The conversation was honest, layered, sometimes painful, but there was no more fear. That afternoon, he found a note on his desk, unsigned, scribbled on a torn piece of notebook paper. "I hated you, but I think I hate my ignorance more." It meant more than applause. Outside the classroom, however, things were far from settled. At lunch, Jade pulled Kelsey aside. "I think they're planning something." Kelsey blinked. "Who?" "Tradition Club. Luke's been meeting with some of the Pinebrook parents crowd off campus. My cousin saw them at that country club restaurant, late. Like, after hours." Isaiah joined them, holding up his phone. "They're organizing a student petition to demand that all political activism be removed from the classroom. They're trying to frame 203 Rising as a domestic threat. No joke. That's the language they're using." Kelsey exhaled slowly. "They want to flip the narrative, make us the danger." "They're already doing it," Jade replied, "and they've got adults backing them." That evening, the @Real Jefferson Voices account released a special report titled "The Cult of 203, When Student Movements Crossed the Line." The video was slick, professionally edited. It borrowed language from right-wing talking points and made vague references to outside influence, teacher indoctrination, and leftist corruption of youth. Within hours, it was being picked up by conservative bloggers across the state. At the same time, 203 Rising's Instagram account was hit with a content takedown. 3 posts were flagged as violating community guidelines. No explanation, no appeal option. Their reach dropped instantly. Comments vanished, shares stopped. Someone had triggered a coordinated report campaign. But they didn't stop there. The next morning, the school's Wi-Fi filters were mysteriously updated. The website trackthetruth.net, Natalie Chen's archive of events, was now blocked on all school devices. The justification? Potential political bias and inappropriate content. Natalie was furious. "This is erasure," she told Kelsey. This is literal censorship. Kelsey nodded grimly. They're scared, but they're also more organized now. They're trying to rewrite the story while we're still living it. That afternoon, a physical copy of the Pinebrook Sentinel hit newsstands with the headline, "School in Chaos. Is Freeman really the right role model?" The article referenced anonymous students and parents who described his class as intimidating, aggressive, and too focused on race. None of them were quoted directly. No evidence was provided, but the narrative was planted. And then came the call. Principal White was summoned to a private board session. No press, no observers, just 5 members and a closed door. An emergency personnel review, they called it. What followed was 2 hours of pointed questions. Have you created a hostile climate for parents? Are you endorsing political activism on school grounds? Do you understand the financial risk of continued controversy? When he left the room, he wasn't fired, but he wasn't free either. That same day, an anonymous tip claimed Mr. Freeman had distributed radical literature to students, specifically a printed copy of a Ta-Nehisi Coates essay he'd included in a unit on modern American narratives. He was suspended again. The students found out through a group chat notification. Mr. Freeman won't be teaching tomorrow. He's been removed again. This time no one cried, no one screamed. They planned. The next morning, Kelsey walked into school wearing a black hoodie with white letters that read, "We are the lesson." Isaiah wore the same. So did Jade. So did Natalie. So did 50 students. Then 75. Then 200. When the bell rang, no one moved. Instead, students flooded into the halls, sat down, pulled out books by Baldwin, Coates, Morrison, started reading aloud in unison. Teachers tried to stop them. Most didn't. The protest lasted 23 minutes. 1 minute for each day Freeman had been removed over the past semester. They ended with silence, not out of defeat, but defiance. Then they stood and walked calmly to class. That afternoon, a fire broke out in the school's boiler room. It was quickly contained, but someone used the chaos to scrawl in red paint across the gym floor. Burn it down. Security footage later showed 2 figures in hooded sweatshirts escaping through a side door. No one could identify them, but the backlash was instant. 203. Rising was blamed again. Social media lit up with accusations. Carol Mathers demanded criminal charges. Tradition Club called for Kelsey's expulsion. Even Grace Ellis, watching from afar, sensed it. The story has hit its final fuse. That night, Kelsey sat at her desk staring at an open email. It was from a law firm. Subject line: cease and desist. Defamation. Harassment allegations. They accused her of inciting online harassment, misusing school property, and targeting families. It was a scare tactic, but it worked. Her hands trembled. Her heart raced. She typed a message to Jade. "I think I need to disappear for a bit," and pressed send. Meanwhile, Mr. Freeman sat in his apartment watching a news segment about the protest. They showed the students reading aloud. No narration, no spin, just voices in harmony. He turned off the screen, closed his eyes, and whispered, "They learned everything I hoped they would." The halls of Jefferson High had never felt so fragile. Since the boiler room fire, rumors spread like smoke. Local police arrived twice in 1 week. Anonymous emails were sent to the district with phrases like subversive cell and radical indoctrination. The gymnasium was closed indefinitely. 203. Rising's logo once printed proudly on posters and hoodies, had become a symbol of suspicion to some and quiet reverence to others. Students who wore it were either ignored, admired, or accused. The word cult appeared in PTA group chats. Kelsey Tran's name was scrubbed from the school newspaper's online archives, but silence was no longer an option. The school board announced an emergency assembly to address recent concerns and restore community trust. It was to be held in the auditorium on a Thursday afternoon. Students would be dismissed from final period early. Attendance was mandatory. Cameras were banned. Kelsey debated whether to show up at all. She hadn't been at school in 4 days. After the legal threat, she had pulled back, disabled comments, locked her account, skipped meetings. Her parents begged her to stop completely. "You've done enough," her mother whispered over dinner. "Let someone else carry the torch now." But that was the problem. There was no one else. Jade called her that morning. "You don't have to speak," she said. "Just be there. So they see you're not scared." "I am scared," Kelsey admitted. "So are we," Jade replied. "But we're still going." The auditorium buzzed with tension. Teachers sat on the sidelines. Students filled the seats. The stage was empty except for a podium, a folded American flag, and a large school crest projected on a screen. Superintendent Belmont spoke first. He used words like healing, respect, unity. Then Carol Mathers took the stage. She wore a navy blazer, a cross around her neck, and a controlled smile. She called for clear policies to separate learning from ideology, warned of emotional manipulation in classrooms, and urged students to remember who pays for their education. Some clapped. Others stared, stunned. Finally, Principal White approached the podium. He looked tired, unshaven, but his voice was steady. "I know we're tired of this story. I know some of you want it to end, but the story isn't over. And pretending otherwise won't protect anyone." He paused. "We've seen more honesty in our students these past few months than in every district meeting combined. They've shown more responsibility, more courage. So today, if we're going to talk about restoring trust, maybe we should start by listening." He turned, and to everyone's surprise, nodded to the wings. A figure stepped onto the stage. Mr. Freeman. The room held its breath. He wore a grey suit, no tie. His eyes scanned the room like he was memorizing it. He didn't walk to the podium. He walked to the front of the stage and sat on the edge, legs dangling. Then he began to speak. "I wasn't born in a town like Pinebrook," he said. "I grew up where the streets cracked from heat and concrete gave off the only warmth in winter. My teachers were tired, my mother was tired, but books didn't get tired." He paused. "My first history teacher taught me that everything had a cost: justice, freedom, silence." He looked up. "When I walked into room 203, I didn't walk in to fight. I walked in to teach, to give students what I was once given: permission to ask why, and permission to be the answer." The room was dead silent. "I didn't tell them what to think. I asked them to think. And when they did, some of you got scared." He stood now. "And instead of asking why your children were asking hard questions, you asked why I was still allowed to speak." The tension in the room grew taut, like a pulled string. "To those who threatened me, thank you. You reminded me that telling the truth has always been dangerous. And to those who stood by me, thank you. You reminded me that danger doesn't mean silence." He looked at the board. "You don't need to reinstate me. I'm already a part of this place, because my voice lives in them now. He turned to the crowd. And nothing you do can take that away. Then he walked off stage. No applause, no jeers, just stunned silence. Outside the auditorium, students gathered. The air felt heavy but electric. Something had changed, not in policy, not in paperwork, but in posture. The students stood straighter. 203 Rising's members didn't speak loudly anymore. They didn't have to. Their presence was a declaration. A week later, the board voted quietly to create a student-faculty review council on classroom content. It was a compromise. Symbolic, partial, fragile. Mr. Freeman was not officially reinstated, but the district invited him to advise curriculum inclusivity initiatives. Most saw through the language. Still, it was a door, not wide, not open, but cracked. And in Pinebrook, that was everything. Kelsey sat in the library again, the same table where she'd first posted that image on Instagram months ago. She opened her notebook. At the top of the page, she wrote, "They tried to bury the story, but we grew through the cracks." Then she flipped to a clean page and began to write something new. Not a post, not a protest, just a story. Because sometimes, that's the most dangerous thing of all. Months later, Grace Ellis's documentary premiered at the National Education Conference. It was titled Truth Interrupted. It opened with a wide shot of students sitting silently in a hallway, reading Baldwin aloud. It ended with a single line from Mr. Freeman, spoken softly over the black screen. "They'll forget our names someday, but not what we taught them to remember."